Welcome to This Week in South Carolina. I'm Gavin Jackson. With the 2020 election more than a year away and South Carolina's primary more than 9 months away, Democratic candidates are continuously visiting the state for the country's first in the South primary. And with that, they're getting involved in local issues, including education. Here's a special report on the teachers' rally at the State House this week and the politics surrounding education reform, from the local level up to presidential politics. 10,000 teachers and supporters turned out at the State House this week, signaling to leaders and lawmakers that they want to see results in this year of education, in which a massive overhaul bill has stalled in the Senate. More money, smaller class sizes, fewer tests, less paperwork, and more are the demands, some of which are in the state's proposed budget. But respect is what they want most.
Just the inequality in the funding for education. I think a lot of people don't understand that the funding formula just isn't funding. It's not about a raise. It's not. I don't want to make six figures. I just want to have to stop buying snacks and supplies for my kids.
It's been real frustrating. I started in a very affluent school district. I taught at a Title I school, but I had a budget of $40,000. And here in Sumter, my combined budget between both schools is about $850 to buy music. And to be legal, I have to buy a copy for every single one of my students. And I have about 100 students. And so, parents are supportive, some parents are supportive, but I really don't feel that the legislator is very supportive. I feel like we get a whole lot of lip service.
Governor Henry McMaster wants more than lip service and budget funding as well.
What I want to be sure happens is that the legislature, by the end of this year, passes education reform. They've on the way to passing some measures, including a teacher pay raise, which will be the first of a succession. But we've got to take strong steps forward and see to it that our education is as good as it can possibly be.
And 2020 candidates are weighing in as well, including California Senator Kamala Harris, who held a roundtable on education funding the day before the rally.
And on this issue of teacher pay, the issue then is one of whether or not we as a society are valuing, are we attributing value to, are we honoring the significance and importance of our teachers, not only in terms of their awesome profession and what they do to train and prepare for that profession, but also what they do to invest in the future of our country through the skill of their profession.
Joining us to discuss the 2020 campaign is Todd, professor and chair of the Political Science Department at the University of South Carolina, and Gibbs, professor and chair of the Political Science Department at the College of Charleston. Thank you both for joining us.
Absolutely. Thank you.
So before we get into 2020 discussion, there's obviously a huge teacher rally here in Columbia this week. Obviously, biggest news of the week, I'd say. You are both educators. I want to kind of get your thoughts on this. Obviously, that more focus on K through 12 teachers, but again, educators nonetheless. What's it like, Gibbs, to see such a huge turnout, maybe both from a political perspective and also from a teacher perspective?
Yeah, almost everyone has teachers that they can look back on that had a huge impact on their life, and to see those teachers out there advocating for the importance of education, for the importance of children, was really great. And, this has happened in some other states. It happened in West Virginia. It happened in Kentucky, and it's interesting that it's now come to South Carolina. Whether it will move the needle, we still don't know, but it was certainly great to see that kind of support and see that kind of enthusiasm yesterday.
And Todd, your thoughts on just the state of education in South Carolina, what you think needs to be done and what it's like to see such a turnout for teachers, 10,000?
Well, certainly the teachers were fairly clear in terms of their concerns about class size, their concerns about sort of just a range of issues. I mean, you saw a range of signs, but class size among many other issues sort of being the key to questions that they're raising with the legislature. I think it's also interesting that they're kind of asking this question at a propitious time, that you've had these protests in other states, but certainly legislators have been thinking about education education reform on some level. And so maybe the teachers are helping to move the needle. 10,000 strong out there certainly may have some impact. We'll just see what the specific impact is.
Mm-hmm. And like a lot of lawmakers were saying, there is money in the budget for teacher pay raises. There's money for infrastructure investment in these high poverty districts. There's more money for mental health counselors and money for SROs. So lawmakers have been putting money in the budget, but again, teachers are talking about those small class sizes, which still needs to get more reform done, more teachers in the classrooms to help with that too. So more needs to be done. And of course, like we said, the Senate is pretty much kind of stalled for the year on this education bill, but there could be potential in the offseason for them to take it up. We don't know yet. We still have 3 more days left in the session to find that out. But switching gears into 2020, we are seeing candidates take up these local issues, especially education in South Carolina. We saw Senator Kamala Harris really coming out in the forefront with that. Gibbs, is this something that we're going to see more of? Maybe these candidates coming through the state and latching onto these local issues and kind of promoting them on a national level?
I think so. So Senator Harris has a proposal to pay teachers more money and have the federal government be involved in that, to jumpstart with some money and then also to provide some matching funds. We actually had J.A. Moore in South Carolina introduce that legislation. I don't think it's gone anywhere in the State House in Columbia, but it is this opportunity for a presidential candidate to talk about local policy. That's kind of new in South Carolina. We haven't seen that a lot for presidential candidates getting involved in local issues. We saw it with John McCain on the Confederate flag, where he called it a symbol of racism back in 2000, and then the very next day he changed his mind and said it was actually a symbol of heritage. So he flip-flopped a little bit, but for the most part, presidential candidates stick to national issues. They stick to big picture. They don't get involved in local issues. This is potentially something that could change here in 2020.
And is that something maybe, Todd, like we did see Bakari Sellers out there at that rally for the teachers, who's obviously with the Kamala Harris campaign. Are we going to see more of these maybe local issues? I don't know, maybe other big local issues. I mean, we didn't see anyone talking about infrastructure for the gas tax increase, a couple years ago, but it seems like education, which is a huge issue for Democrats, is probably easy fodder for the campaign trail.
It certainly would be. And I think another issue that certainly has national implications, but definitely state implications is the question of health care, right? And so the degree to which Democratic candidates have been taking stances with regards to the notion of Medicare for all, certainly that's a federal program. But given what we've done in the state or haven't done in the state with regards to ACA and the extension of Medicaid, that will have local implications as well. So there's national issues that will redound to state and local issues.
And it was interesting too because I was at Senator Harris had a roundtable with educators the day before the rally, and it was just listening to them, getting their feedback, talking about her proposals. And then Elizabeth Warren had a conference call with teachers after the rally on Wednesday. So a lot of them on the sidelines, Senator Mike Fanning was saying that, they didn't really want these teachers out there distracting. And maybe that is true to an extent. You don't want too much of the spotlight off of the local
no one
issues.
spoke there, but again, with the magic of Twitter, you can tweet support. And so we saw almost every candidate came through and said something about in support of the teachers, support in what they're trying to do. And that makes sense. I think it was just South Carolina Democratic politicians, of the politicians that were out there speaking, not Republicans. And certainly, it almost was a thing that the 2020 candidates felt like they had to weigh in on yesterday.
And really quick, Gibbs, just kind of follow up on that. I mean, again, Governor McMaster was talking about, he does understand the teachers' feelings on this, but, stay in the classroom and continue to teach. Speaker Jay Lucas kind of had similar thoughts. Superintendent of Education Molly Spearman, again, was not there. She was actually substitute teaching, but also kind of wasn't for that. Not walkout, but it's for the teachers.
I would say Republicans have a cushion. They control the House, they control the Senate, they control the governorship. But they should be careful. They need to take this seriously. Obviously, they have. Speaker Lucas has shepherded a bill through the House, but this could be the type of issue. There's a lot of people. Everybody knows a teacher. A lot of people, have a teacher in their family, and so if this is something that the tide turns, it could be the type of issue that could be dangerous for Republicans the next time there's a governor's race, the next time there's a House or Senate election.
Even though it's that far away, it could still have ripples, or people would still remember, maybe?
Yeah, very much the case. I think, Gibbs is right on about the question of education is one of those issues everyone, whether you have children or not, you feel you have a stake in. And you certainly feel you can take a stance, again, given this identification with the teacher that you're fond of. And so, In some ways, I think we can think of education. It is a bridge issue. It could be a bridge issue, and certainly public education could be a bridge issue. So even a Democrat trying to make a case about ways in which we need to do better on education in the state, going through the list of where we are in terms of 40th, or where we fall on that list, certainly could make headway of the issue if not handled properly now.
Mm-hmm. Switching gears to 2020, the big announcement was Joe Biden announcing that he was getting in the race. We were all waiting for that announcement. I think it would maybe have been sooner had Senator Fritz Hollings not passed away. Right. But new CNN poll came out this week, and it said that Biden has the clear support, but among whites, Biden has 29% support, Bernie Sanders 15% support, and then among non-whites, Biden jumps to 50%, and everyone else kind of drops off more so than they were. What's that say to Joe Biden? I mean, that's a pretty strong place to start where you are right now.
It is. In South Carolina, again, support from African American voters is critical. I mean, African Americans made up 65% of Democratic presidential primary voters in 2016. So if Biden's able to win support amongst that group, that's a good sign for him. I mean, there's a few things that are different about 2016. You've got tons of candidates, more than we've really ever had. Reminiscent of 2016 for Republicans, and it's also important to remember that it's an open primary, so folks in the middle, we don't register by party here. There's not a Republican contest, so it's very possible that folks maybe in the middle that are sort of leaning Republican or Democrat would want to go in and weigh in on the Democratic primary in 2020.
Which could maybe skew our historical average of, pretty much being right, except for John Edwards, essentially, right? I mean, we're going to have additional people jumping in. How do you differentiate yourself at that point when you have so many people in the race there, Todd?
Yeah, I think the front runner status is really quite key now. And now I'll be very careful about comparisons. I'm not a historian, but historians warn us about too many comparisons historically. And 4 years ago wouldn't be considered history per se. But is 2016 on the Republican side now the equivalent for Democrats in 2020 in the sense of the number of candidates at that time in the Republican race? And so, I know Biden would be a little concerned about being compared to Trump, but has the ability to kind of quickly gain that front runner status and solidify that important status in order to fend off additional individuals getting into the race or whittling down the field. And
that was my question too. Is that I'm wondering. When we get these guys locked in, your Bernie Sanders, your Joe Bidens, I mean, is there room for anyone else to move, or are we going to kind of just be stuck where we are with everyone kind of maybe fighting for third and fourth, and what does that even mean at that point?
Yeah, it's going to be, Biden has the name recognition, and Biden was the VP for Barack Obama, who was a popular two-term president, first African-American president in American history. So certainly somebody who I think, is going to be a formidable candidate. Bernie Sanders has also run before, and he's got his core diehard support. So sort of who's that next person? I mean, I think so far in South Carolina, it looks like Kamala Harris is probably, doing the best at sort of that next person. It could be Cory Booker. Certainly there are other candidates out there. They're going to make their case, but I would say when you look back at history, African American candidates have done better in South Carolina than they've done in other states. You see that back to Jesse Jackson in '84 and '88. You see that with Al Sharpton. You see that certainly with Barack Obama. So I would again look at Cory Booker and Kamala Harris. But again, we've not had two African Americans in a Democratic primary before, so that changes the dynamic. So we've got a huge primary, and we've got a very diverse set of candidates.
And Todd Gibbs just kind of touched on that, but the Obama factor. So far, it's been kind of mellow right now. We haven't heard too much from Barack yet, but I mean, that's in the offing. Is that just? I mean, he's going to have to eventually back Joe Biden, right? I mean, that's,
in some way, he already has.
Yeah.
In some ways, in the sense of. There's the Biden sort of commercial with regards to Obama giving him praise. I think it was for the Medal of Honor. And so in some ways, being able, even for Biden to replay the clips where Obama wouldn't take it back. So certainly to replay the clips of where he's given praise to his vice president. Certainly he's probably going to set out for the great great extent of the primary until such time as he feels, ex-presidential
Not to overburden,
not to overburden, right? I think the interesting thing, to Gibbs's point, I think the interesting thing is there a parallel to 2008 here, where is Biden Hillary Clinton? And is Kamala Harris or Cory Booker Barack Obama? That sort of, and I think they're both trying to use the Obama playbook. I think everyone's trying to use aspects of the Obama playbook. Could they use sort of South Carolina as I don't know if spoiler is the right word, but certainly gain a foothold in South Carolina, springboard in South Carolina, very much like was true with Obama once he came out of Iowa.
Yeah, so absolutely, and I think Todd's exactly right. So what could happen here is you got Iowa and New Hampshire, these very non-diverse white states predominantly, and so they're just not representative of the country. And here you have a place like South Carolina that certainly has this large portion of African American voters, and right after South Carolina comes a number of southern states and typically South Carolina has not only been a good predictor of who's going to win the nomination, they've been a really, really good predictor of who's going to win in these other southern states that have similar demographic profiles. So I do think whether it's Cory Booker or Kamala Harris, I would expect them to be competitive. And I love the Joe Biden-Hillary Clinton comparison as well, because they're both longtime Democrats. They both have a foothold in the state. They've spent time in the state. Biden still comes down to Kiowa and vacations. He's got a lot of contacts. But, is the person living in Orangeburg, African-American, longtime Democrat, going to side with Joe Biden, or is she going to side with Kamala Harris? I mean, that's what ultimately these folks are trying to figure out, and the strategists are going to be working harder for those people.
And I'm thinking what it comes down to some of these people and voters I've talked to is who can beat Donald Trump, essentially.
Right,
so, I mean, if you already see Joe Biden, who's already on the defense, he's already going for Trump, versus the other candidates who are introducing themselves to voters, it's kind of a judgment call there onto what happens.
It is. I mean, I think in some ways Biden will make a case, and I think he'll be careful about the experience case, because he knows how that was a difficult road to toe for Hillary Clinton. But at the same time, I think he'll make the case that I can beat Trump. And here are the following reasons why you should think about this. Of course, he wants to pull upon the experience of being vice president to Barack Obama. And so he's got a difficult sort of line to walk here, particularly also given his own political history. And he's sort of decades of being in public office. You have a long record that could be critiqued. And so that's, there are plenty of opportunities for unexpected things to happen.
And kind of Gibbs just talking about the diversity of the state, which makes South Carolina unique in the Democratic primaries specifically. What role do we look at Nevada? Nevada will be the week before us. Not quite the same amount of African American voters, but a high Hispanic population, which has always been trying to be touted as the future of the party. Where do we fit in with what maybe we see in Nevada and then South Carolina?
So there are 4 states that have these so-called carve-out status: Iowa, New Hampshire, Nevada, and South Carolina. And the Democratic National Committee is behind this. They want these 4 states to be early. South Carolina was picked in large portion because of its African American voters and how important they are and how important they are to the Democratic Party. For Nevada, it was Hispanic voters and labor unions that were some of the things that really were represented, that were missing in Iowa and New Hampshire, but Nevada brings to the table. But Nevada also a critically important state, and the ability to talk to Hispanic voters is going to be key there.
And just talking about the wide open field, we're going to have a debate soon this summer. In June, July, there'll be debates going on. Qualifications to get on the stage. All the top players have already qualified, essentially, get on there. The field, I think someone else just announced today. I mean, there's 20 plus people at this point.
I'm losing track.
We already had the first quarter results in for fundraising. We've seen kind of who's getting what and how, who's blowing the money out. Biden, of course, got the record for single day donations. So I'm wondering, when are we going to start seeing this field get whittled down? You're talking about the 2016 Republican field. We had 6 Republicans on the ballot for primary day in 2016. Are we going to get to that? And then how do we get there in the first place?
We may not get to 6, but I do think people will drop out even before any votes are cast in Iowa and New Hampshire. And certainly, if you don't do well in one of those states, it's hard to continue. So I do think we're going to get. I think we're February 29th, 2020, and so it's. I don't expect that we'll have this many people to choose from, but I think we're going to have more than usual. It's very. This is not going to be a 2-person show like it was Hillary Clinton versus Bernie Sanders. I mean, even the Maryland governor was not really a player in South Carolina back in 2016.
And so then I'm wondering then, if we do have a good bit of people, 6, 5, 4, even more than 2. People are excited about having all these candidates in the first place, but what does momentum look like if you have 6 people? I mean, is it a matter of you won South Carolina, you still won, even if it's by a percentage or 5%? Or what's the takeaway for these candidates, if it's such a huge field come February 29th?
Well, I think they're are going to use sort of history as a guide and sort of think about those delegate counts true for in past races for the front runners. I think we also have to think about what's going to be happening within the party and the discussion around this whole question of superdelegates.
Right.
And how exactly, because there was a lot of contention around that and has been contention within the party. There's a reason why that reform occurred, but now the question becomes, well, is it too easy to identify a front runner? And so, in part, they will have to kind of it's a simple math exercise at some point of exactly do you have that requisite number according to the convention rules.
But even looking at getting 3rd place in South Carolina, 4th place, we look back to Ted Cruz and Marco Rubio was in 2nd place. They were fighting for that 2nd place spot by a fraction of a percentage point. Is that going to be enough for people to say, hey, I still got a close 3rd or a close 4th in South Carolina. Let's go into Super Tuesday with some momentum.
I think so, and I think California's earlier than ever this time as well, and so I think people can maybe hang on a little bit longer just because it's even more front-loaded than ever. It seems like there's so many states that are going to. So this nomination will be over earlier, but again, social media also allows people to compete and get their message out in a way that it was more difficult in previous cycles than it was in previous cycles.
And Todd, do you think that Bernie Sanders has that built-in, that group? I mean, we saw him in North Charleston. I mean, it was like a 2016 rally. He got 96,500 votes in 2016. Does he keep those essentially and then build up from there, or possibly even go down from there? I mean, and then everyone can fight for the remaining 73% that Hillary Clinton got, essentially?
I wouldn't discount Bernie Sanders. I think particularly in terms of his ground game, and I think the way in which he can make a legitimate claim within the party of, I've been loyal to the party and I've actually pushed some reforms that have moved the party. And so in some ways, there's still going to be a strong element of here in South Carolina and elsewhere that would argue, well, if you're going to go for a Biden, why not a Sanders? So now, does he expand his base? That's a difficult thing given the field.
Yeah.
That's an entirely different question.
Because it was a predominantly white crowd that we saw in North Charleston, and you're in North Charleston of all places.
Right.
I mean, a very heavily African American community there, and to have
he was at an African American church, but it was not the most diverse crowd I've ever seen. So.
And that's not indicative of just Bernie. I mean, some of the other candidates I've seen have had those kind of crowds. And you do see a more diverse crowd with Kamala and with Cory Booker, but still, maybe it's still too early for people to actually be that engaged. A lot of these people maybe are really engaged in hardcore Democrats in the first place, so they are out more.
Well, it is interesting because there was both sort of this discussion in the African American community about younger African Americans lending some support to Sanders, particularly in South Carolina. But then also there's the pushback that Sanders had received from the Black Lives Matter movement that were sort of, and they were doing it really for all candidates back in 2016 about sort of trying to push this question of criminal justice reform. So he has some decisions to make about how can he expand his base.
Gotcha. And then just kind of looking at the state as a whole, we have about 5 minutes left. Gibbs, I want to talk to you about shifting demographics in South Carolina. If they are shifting, we did see a lot of change happen in the midterms, especially down in the 1st congressional district.
Yeah, South Carolina, I don't think we're supposed to get a new House seat. So with the reapportionment, I think we're going to still see population growth. But yeah, I mean, that 1st congressional district in Charleston, that was an upset district. Trump wins by 13 percentage points in 2016, and then the Democrat Joe Cunningham comes back and takes that, one of the biggest upsets. And so the real question I've been trying to figure out is the 1st district a microcosm for what we could expect in some other districts in South Carolina and maybe statewide someday. There are a lot of people moving here from other areas. There are, folks are, there's young folks that are moving to Charleston and staying there that tend to be a little more Democratic. So, I do think demographics are changing. I don't think it's a tidal wave change, but I do think it'll have an impact moving forward.
So there's any way we can become a swing state at any point? I mean, we're a pretty solid Republican state, but you look at North Carolina, you look at Virginia, obviously a lot of shift there. But Is there any way to know when that might happen? Because people ask me all the time, I'm like, well, just keep looking at the voting data.
Northern Virginia, we're not going to become too
No,
soon. I'm cautiously, well, optimistic's the wrong word, but I'm cautious about this question because, quite frankly, I've been in the state of South Carolina now 16 years, and I've heard this discussion about us being a swing state, of being more purple than is reflected in the vote. I mean, I think in some respects, it really is a matter of how competitive can the opposition party of Democrats be to the dominant party of Republicans, of course. And because there's still such a bit of a polarization in the vote here, you don't kind of have a missing middle in South Carolina that would be more of the swing voter. And so it's not just demographics, it really will be sort of what can the parties do to capture those demographic trends, because neither one of us are implying that it will happen on its own.
Yeah, because Trump beat Hillary by 300,000 votes.
Right.
McMaster defeated James Smith by about 137,000 votes.
Right.
Again, different years, off year versus presidential year, but still pretty hefty margins to overcome if you wanted to say turn South Carolina blue, like some people.
Absolutely, and I think I love the states you picked out, because is South Carolina more like a North Carolina or Virginia, or more like an Alabama or a Mississippi? And we're probably somewhere in the middle in terms of demographics and policies and things like that. So trying to figure out which direction the state's going to move. I think with the growth that the state is seeing, I sort of think it tends to go more in the North Carolina, Virginia direction, which would mean a little more likely to be a swing state, but still not anywhere close to Northern Virginia.
Just really quick with 2 minutes left, we look at President Donald Trump, still is very popular with his base. Republicans still back him. What factor does he play in this role, in this race, when we look at the general election, perhaps? And we have a strong economy at this point. Is it going to be hard to defeat an incumbent? It always is. I mean, what's the role there at this point going forward?
Well, a very prominent role, of course. And in some ways, I think, I don't know if President Trump's playbook is going to change from 2016. We don't have any indications yet, at least from a policy and presidential sort of, rhetoric standpoint. So it really is a matter of what will the Democratic challenger do, and how will she or he, sort of walk that line between, if I'm only anti-Trump, that will simply mobilize a base and may not bring out my own, but at the same time, what are those policies that will really kind of attract? Because, of course, it will depend on where the economy is as well. And are we still growing, or is something, had an impact on the economy?
Yeah, I mean, with approval ratings in the mid to low 40s nationally, given how good the economy is, I think there's some real signs of trouble for Trump. We saw that what happened in 2018 with the House elections, which are really a pretty good barometer of where the nation in general is, and it was a big blue wave for Democrats. And so I think Trump is in trouble. Anything can happen. You can sort of run the table with that right mix of states and do it because of the Electoral College. But, if I were the Trump folks, I'd be very, very concerned.
Great discussion. I feel like the next time we talk, everything will be different from what we talked right now.
It's politics.
So we can bet on the change. Thanks to Todd and Gibbs for being here, and thank you for joining us. Also, check out the South Carolina Lead, a political podcast that can be found on your podcast app on any mobile device. Each week, I recap the weekly political news with reporters who cover it. From the Kennedy Greenhouse studio on the campus of the University of South Carolina, I'm Gavin Jackson.